The snow outside fell in silence, heavy and unrelenting, like the weight of loneliness pressing against her chest. Inside the dimly lit house, a single woman sat by the window, her hands wrapped around a chipped mug of lukewarm tea, staring at the streetlights that flickered like distant stars. It was Christmas Eve. Families across the neighborhood filled their homes with laughter, with the smell of roasted turkeys and cinnamon pies, with the warmth of togetherness. But for Clara, there was no laughter. No family. No one to call. Just silence. Silence that felt like a cruel punishment on a night meant for joy. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the power of simple human connection to change a life, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who might need it, and subscribe to Kindness. Your support helps spread stories that touch the heart. Clara had once loved Christmas. When she was a child, she remembered her mother baking gingerbread cookies until the whole house smelled sweet and warm. She remembered her father, with his deep laugh, stringing colored lights that blinked proudly in the frosty night. She remembered being small enough to sit on her father's shoulders to place the star on the tree. But those memories belonged to another life, one that had slipped away piece by piece. Her parents had passed years ago. Friends had drifted apart as the decades rolled on. And after her divorce 5 years earlier, Clara had found herself growing more and more isolated, until loneliness became her only companion. Now, at 53, she sat alone in a quiet house with no tree, no lights, and no presents to unwrap. She had told herself it didn't matter. She had told herself Christmas was just another day. But her heart knew better. Her heart longed for the sound of laughter, for someone to say her name with warmth, for even a single knock at the door to remind her she was not forgotten. The clock ticked past 8. Outside, children in the street threw snowballs, their voices carrying through the air, cutting Clara deeper with every giggle. She pulled her blanket tighter, trying to drown out the ache of being invisible. She thought about turning off the light and going to bed early, sleeping through the holiday entirely. Maybe then she wouldn't feel it. Maybe then she wouldn't hear the echo of absence in her empty house. But just as she stood to leave her chair, there came a sound she never expected. 3 gentle knocks at her door. For a moment, she froze. Her heart leapt. Who could it be? She had no visitors, no one who would come. Perhaps it was a mistake. Perhaps they had the wrong house. But the knocking came again, soft yet insistent. Clara's breath caught as she made her way to the door. When she opened it, the cold night rushed in, and there on her doorstep stood a neighbor she barely knew, an older man named Harold from 2 houses down. His face was kind, weathered by years, and in his hands he held a plate of cookies wrapped neatly in foil. "I thought you might like some company tonight," he said with a hesitant smile, his eyes warm despite the frost. Clara's throat tightened. For a moment, she could not speak. She had spent so long building walls around her loneliness, convincing herself that nobody noticed her absence, that nobody cared. And yet here was Harold, standing in the cold, offering not just cookies, but the one gift she craved more than anything, presents. She invited him in. The house felt different the moment he stepped across the threshold, less empty, less suffocating. They sat together at the small kitchen table, sharing cookies and cups of tea. Harold told her about his late wife, about how he too had spent many Christmases alone, until he learned that the best way to survive loneliness was to reach out, to knock on doors, to remind others they weren't forgotten. Clara listened, her heart opening in ways she hadn't allowed in years. As the hours passed, the two of them laughed gently, shared stories of holidays past, and found comfort in their shared experiences of loss and healing. The silence in Clara's house was gone, replaced with the rhythm of conversation and the soft hum of companionship. It wasn't extravagant. There were no gifts beneath a tree, no carols sung by a choir. But in its simplicity, it was perhaps the most meaningful Christmas she had ever known. And something shifted deep within her that night. For the first time in years, she realized she didn't have to face life's winters alone. Kindness had walked through her door, wrapped not in shiny paper but in the courage of a neighbor who cared enough to knock. The next morning, Clara woke to the sunlight pouring through her window. She felt lighter, as though a burden had been lifted. And when she looked outside, she saw Harold shoveling her driveway, his breath fogging in the crisp air. She stepped outside with 2 steaming mugs of cocoa, and for a moment, standing there in the snow, she felt something she hadn't felt in so long: belonging. The days that followed blossomed into a friendship that gave Clara hope again. Harold would stop by often, sometimes with a loaf of bread, sometimes just with conversation. In turn, Clara found herself baking again, laughing again, even daring to put up a few decorations the next Christmas. The walls she had built slowly crumbled, replaced by a bridge of connection that carried her back into the warmth of community. Christmas, she realized, was never about the presents or the perfect decorations. It was about people. About showing up when someone feels forgotten. About knocking on doors where silence has settled in too deep. And though Clara had once believed her life had become a shadow, she discovered that a single act of kindness could reignite light where darkness had lingered too long. If this story has touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to Kindness. Every click helps these stories of hope and compassion reach someone who might desperately need to hear them. Before we end, I want to ask you one thing: what's the kindest knock you've ever received in your life? Share your answer in the comments. I would love to read your stories. Because sometimes, the smallest gesture, a plate of cookies, a neighbor's smile, a knock on the door, can change everything. And on that Christmas night, when Clara thought she had been completely forgotten, she learned the most beautiful truth of all: no one is ever truly alone when kindness still lives in the world.